Hello and welcome to the topic Making of the Global World, Class 10 History. We have studied in the topic globalization how the world has shrunk. How did globalization take place? What are the benefits of globalization? Are there any disadvantages of globalization? We discussed about all this. How do people travel? How do ideas travel? And what exactly happens when this exchange takes place? Simply, globalization is interconnection, is the movement, mingling, travel, migration of people, of trade, in search of work, movement of capital, movement of goods, movement of skill, movement of ideas, movement of ideologies, movement of values, movement of valuables, precious stones, germs, and also when people started moving in this way, there was also the exchange of germs and diseases. So, why did the people travel? They wanted to travel, explore, trade. Some priests, religious scholars, they wanted to go on pilgrimage, know about the new places, gain the religious knowledge to have a spiritual fulfillment. Some of them wanted to escape from persecution. On being tortured in their own country, they went to seek refuge in other countries. So, the movement of this kind of people from one place to another went as early as 3000 before the Common Era or the Christian era. They have been exploring the coastal regions in search of precious stones, precious gems, materials, and many more. In this way, they came in search of one of the best civilizations of the time, the Indus Valley civilization in India. For more than a millennium, the currency or the shells, which were called as kaudi in Hindi, that has been the most relevant form of exchange in terms of material and goods. This was exchanged to countries like China, Egypt, Africa, many more. So, by globalization, we mean to say that there is exchange of business. One country to another country, ideas and trade is moving. Migration is happening, movement of people, movement of capital. People are traveling, trade is happening. Priests, they moved long distances. They wanted to have spiritual fulfillment. They wanted to exchange ideas, skill, goods, money, many more. In course of time, they also brought the diseases. When this movement of goods has taken place through a route, these routes are called as Silk Route. So, do we have only one Silk Route? No. We have many such Silk Routes which are interconnected. The modern trade, the culture is being linked, the people's ideology is being linked. different parts of the country, destinations are being connected. The silk routes are identified, many silk routes are identified by the historians, where exchange of pottery took place. The beautiful porcelain jars of the Chinese with artistic skill is sent to so many regions. And in India, in Southeast Asia, spices, textiles, precious stones, gems, and gold and silver, everything went on. The gems, they were of variety. The Kohinoor diamond of India was a fascinating one. In course of time, the Christian missionaries, they traveled to different countries. Most of them, they carried their documents and their literary work. Exactly in 1453, when the Turkish Sultan has invaded these regions, they escaped, moved to different countries, and in the name of civilization, they wanted to establish the Christian missionaries and started civilizing the people. So the route through which all this exchange has happened, the people carrying the material, people carrying ideology, people carrying precious metals, gold, silver, spices, etc., this happened through many such silk routes. Silk route was linked as early as possible at different destinations like China. For centuries together, China was self contented. It never wanted to mingle with other countries. It felt that by mingling with other countries, it will lose its own country's prosperity. Later, the trade developed. The Silk Route existed before the Christian era and till the 15th era also. The Chinese pottery, silk traveled to different countries. Gold, silver, precious gems, and stones, pearls, they all travel. Even religions like Buddhism, Islam traveled from the Central Asia to other countries. Buddhism, as early one of the religions which preached about the egalitarian rules, the concept of equality for all. There is no discrimination. As a part of travel, food also started exchanging. The food traveled, spaghetti traveled, noodles traveled, potatoes traveled. People who could not earn, they did not have the basic food for consumption. Such foods gave them stamina, that gave them protein to withstand and work for more hours. For example, food stuff like spaghetti noodles, they are the common origin and they traveled from China and they became very widely accepted in the world. The Arab traders took pasta to 5th century Sicily, an island now in Italy. Many of our common foods, potatoes, soya, groundnut, maize, tomatoes, chilies, sweet potatoes, were not known to our ancestors. These foods were introduced in Europe and Asia after Christopher Columbus accidentally discovered the vast continent known as America. He wanted to search India and went in the struggle and went westwards. There he found the black skinned people, and so there he has named these black skinned people, he and the group of travelers. First, America being discovered, one of the important continents, and below that the island group, the West Indies, as it is towards the west. The original inhabitants, they were, he wanted to believe it, search some of the richest spices, textiles, etc., explore India. In search of India, he went and discovered America. This how different kinds of food traveled from one country to another. Noodles traveled from China to other countries. Common foods like potato, chili, tomato, maize, soya, they all traveled. They were introduced in Europe and India through trade route. As these traders came, they introduced these new things in those places. Because of potato, Europe could eat better and live longer because it gave the stamina to withstand. People of Ireland were so very dependent on this potato that when the crop failed for a reason, the crop failure which has destroyed the lifestyle of the people, many people, thousands of people in the mid 1840s died out of starvation, and this is famously called as Irish famine in Ireland. This is spaghetti. The types of noodles today you young generation crave for, the varieties of the junk food brought to different parts of the world by China. Sometimes the new crops could make the difference between the life and death. Some of the foods can give stamina and make the life live longer. And that was the introduction of the crop potato, the humble potato, so cheap but gives the stamina to withstand and face the different challenges of the life, face and build up the immune system. The Ireland poorest peasants became dependent on potatoes so much so that when the disease destroyed the potato crop, the crop failed in the mid 1840s. Hundreds and thousands of people died. This is a case which was given in the news, and people dug out the crop to get at least some crop and make their living, to at least have their life for some time extend. Along with the food, then traveled the disease, and this disease, the Portuguese and the Spanish conquest and the colonization of America was underway by the mid 19th century. The European conquest was not just a result of superior firepower. Instead, most of the powerful weapons of the Spanish conquerors were germs, such as those of smallpox that they carried on their person. So, not only chemical weapons, not only destructive explosives, just through germs, also they destroyed large number of mankind. They were easily affected. That's why during the pandemic, the care was taken that those people who are diseased, they are kept under isolation. Because of their long isolation, America's original inhabitants had no immunity against these diseases that came from Europe. Smallpox proved to be a deadly killer. Today, smallpox is wiped out. Only it was taken as a scientific challenge and it no longer exists. Once introduced, it spreads deep into the continent. It is contagious, ahead even of any European reaching there. It killed and decimated whole community, paving way for conquest. There was no need for a war. There was no need for any explosive or weapon. The disease has done it all for the conquer of the region. The Europeans had exposed to smallpox, so they had immunity. But Americans had no immunity from smallpox. Disease wiped out the whole of the community in certain parts of America. That's how the Europeans captured America. And we studied in class 9 that many of the colonies of America which were captured by the Europeans, even France helped them to come out of their colonization. It helped 13 colonies of America to get independence. We studied this last year. The 19th century, 1815 to 1914, a dramatical change we could see here. And the 19th century, where economic, political, social, cultural, and even technological factors interacted in a complex way to transform the societies and reshape the external relations among the global world. The economists identified three types of movement. The flow has happened in three ways within the international economic exchange. First, flow of trade, which in the 19th century referred largely to trade of goods, example cloth and wheat. Every nation could not produce the textile, so that was the dire need. The second is the flow of labor, the migration of people in search of employment. Those people who could not make their living, they went in search of jobs. We will study about the condition of the laborers in the age of industrialization chapters. The third is the movement of the capital for short term or long term investment over long distances. The countries which were rich and prosperous, they were identifying the nations which were rich in the raw materials and even also labor, and they wanted to invest and make profit. All these flows were closely interwoven or interknit, and they were affecting the people's lives more deeply, and that had a profound impact. Till the 19th century, Europe was suffering from poverty, disease, religious conflict. Till the 18th century, India and China, it had its own troubles, but still they were the richest countries, self sufficient in trade. Only when Europeans entered into India in the name of trade and started capturing the territory and having expansion and imposition of their colonialism and also imperialism and exploitation of resources, then happened the intermingling of culture, the movement of English, the missionaries, and many more. China restricted trade overseas contact for many years and went in isolation for many years. So the Chinese role was reduced, but America's importance was rising. The center of the world was now shifting and it was benefiting the Europe. A new world economy is taking place. Traditionally, the countries like to be self sufficient in food. No country wanted to import food from other countries. India was an agrarian economy, self sufficient for numerous years. 19th century Britain self sufficient in food meant lower living standards and social conflict. So, the population growth from the late 18th century had increased. The demand for food grains in Britain has now increased. In urban centers, the expansion of industries has taken place. The demand for agricultural products now rose up. It has increased the prices relatively. The food grains prices have increased. Under this pressure from the demand for the food grains and the landed group, the government restricted the import of corn. The corn which was coming from other countries, which were sold at low price, that gave a stiff competition to the local producers. The laws were the new laws which were introduced to stop the imports and save the local producers. They were called as the corn laws. Unhappy with the high food prices, industrialists and the urban dwellers, they forced the abolition of the corn laws. So the native people were not able to provide the food at the price which was affordable to the people who were consuming. So the industrialists and the urban dwellers, they asked for the abolition of corn laws. After the corn laws were scrapped, food could be imported into Britain, and now it was available at a considerably very low price within the country. So the time from 1815 to 1914, when the new economy is shaping and a new social system, political system, economic system, a technological growth with the economists and their view to invest, three important flows we have seen. Number one, at the external front or the international front, the economic exchange or the foreign exchange, flow of trade, that is clothes or wheat, is happening because all countries were not agriculturally prosperous. Flow of labor, migration of people in search of job, flow of capital, investment overseas at distant places where raw materials and labor are available. British agriculture was unable to compete with the imports, so we have seen the imposition of the laws. Vast areas of land were left uncultivated, and thousands of men and women were thrown out of work. They flocked to the cities and migrated to overseas other countries. They have shifted as the food prices fell down now, because now the production is more, even also the imports which came, their prices are also low. Consumption in Britain, they it has increased. Now everything is available at cheap low price, so consumption increased. From the mid 19th century, faster industrial growth in Britain led to higher incomes and therefore more food imports. So now industrial production has taken place and people are able to buy goods at cheap, and now they are able to even earn more, their incomes are high, and also they are able to import food once again. Around the world, the East Europe, Russia, America, Australia, and these lands were cleared and the food production expanded to meet the demand. As the population now in Britain has increased, as they are making demands for the food grains, now the lands were converted into agricultural land. This increased with the need for railways because the large farms, extensive farms, were connected with the railway lines where the train used to go to the farm, take the grains, and then go for the mills. So, railway lines were required, and this was directly linked to the agricultural regions. From there, the grains are carried to the ports. The new harbors came into existence and they came to be built up, and old ones were expanded to the new ships being carrying the new cargoes, large amount of goods, movement of goods from one country to another. People had to settle on the lands to bring them under cultivation. So, the world economy with a new vision is shaping up with new investment, with new food production, where the masses are moving to the urban centers and there is huge demand. To meet the rapid growth of the population in Britain, under pressure from landed groups, government has restricted the import of corn. We have discussed about the corn laws, how the corn laws have affected the native producers, but they were not able to afford and sell the corn, the grain to the people at a price which is affordable. So once again the local people, industrialists, they asked the government to lift the corn laws or abolish the corn laws. This meant building homes and settlements. All these activities required large amount of capital and labor. Capital flowed from financial centers such as London. The demand for labor in places where labor was in short supply, as in America, Australia, this led to more and more migration. People wanted to seek the jobs, and we saw the effect of corn laws, how it has affected the people's lives in Britain. Can have a glance. Import of food was much cheaper than Britain could produce at the cost price. The farm could not compete with the imported goods. Vast area of land was left uncultivated. Large number of people could not get the job. They had to give up. They became unemployed. They started migrating. The effect, increase in population. Increase in population, demand also increases for food. When the demand increases, other countries started concentrating on agriculture. Which are those countries which are concentrating on agriculture? Here we can see Eastern European countries, Russia, America, all of them cleared land and they started cultivation. So, once again, the definition of corn law here. I hope you are able to follow. So, now the railway tracks were laid down to supply the food, carry from the production areas to the ports and supply to the countries. And London emerged as a new financial center. There were regions which were supplying ample capital and they invested in the new regions which could give more production. Shortage of labor in America and Australia resulted. Large scale migration took place. Nearly 50,000 people from Europe to America went during the 19th century. All over the world, nearly 150 million people migrated to different places by 1890s. Thus, a global agricultural economy came up, and also the movement of labor, movement of capital, movement of technological changes took place. The Britain government now built a network of irrigation canals. That's how the agriculture has to rise up. To transform the semi desert or wastelands into fertile agricultural lands that could grow wheat and cotton for export. These were called as canal colonies, as the areas irrigated by the new canals were called canal colonies. They were settled by peasants from parts of Punjab. Similarly, the cultivation of cotton expanded worldwide to feed the British textile mills. Now, the invention and discoveries took place period from 1780 to 1820 is called the age of industrialization, and this has expanded the production. The trade was estimated to have multiplied 25 to 40 times. Nearly 60% of the trade comprised primary products, that is, agricultural products, that is, I mean to say, whole wheat, cotton, minerals such as coal. The role of technology was immense. Technology played an important role in all these developments. Railways, steamships, telegraph, everything made its way. The important inventions took place, without which we cannot imagine today's prosperous life, comfortable life that has transformed the total 19th century world. These technological advancements were now directly connected, and that result was on larger social, political, and economic factors affecting the lives of the people. For example, colonization stimulated new investment, improvements in transportation, faster railway, lighter wagons, and large ships that helped movement of people, movement of material quickly rather to far away and distant places, and also to their final destinations or markets. The trade in meat is a good example for this connected process. In 1870s, animals were shipped live from America to Europe and then slaughtered when they were not able to transport them, which consumed more place. Live animals took up a lot of space in the ship, so most of them, out of congestion, they died in the voyage, or they even fell ill. They lost their weight and became unfit to eat. Meat was a product which was expensive, that was a protein based item, and that gives resistance to the people and stamina to live and face the diseases. And majority of the world was non vegetarian, especially the Europeans, Americans, and all were non vegetarians. High prices of this meat, where the live animals were transported, that was not affordable by the poor people. So now, after discovering the new technology, namely refrigerated ships, that made that has enabled the transport of perishable foods over long distances. So now animals were slaughtered, they were cut and sent in pieces, starting from the starting point in America to Australia or New Zealand or some other place, and then they were transported to Europe as frozen meat. This has reduced the shipping cost. This has even lowered the prices of the meat in Europe. Now the Europe people were able to consume more varieties of diet. They who could not get this privilege, who had only monotonous bread and potatoes consumption for their livelihood. Now they are able to eat meat along with butter, eggs, and other things to have a better diet. The living conditions of the people now they had to change, and this was essential because with the imperialism the movement of the goods has taken place. Africa was identified as one of the regions which was rich and prosperous. Till the starting of 19th century, it was not known to the world. But later, Stanley Livingstone, after entering, they discovered that this rich and prosperous continent had many resources which can be exploited. The arrival of the disease called as Pest has created a havoc. This has arrived in Africa in the late 18th century. This came with the horses that were imported from British Asia or Britannia. The Pest spread in Africa like a forest fire. Widespread, it wiped out 90% of the cattle population. They were affected by this disease. And for Africans, loss of cattle means totally loss of livelihood. They had so many cattle that they were dependent on the cattle rearing. There was no need for them to work anywhere. They were self sufficient. But now, loss of cattle, no choice. They had to work as plantation workers or work in the mines, and they were helpless because of this disease. It made Africa colonized. The late 19th century Europeans were attracted because this is a region which was rich in labor, rich in natural resources, who were now willing for any kind of wages because willing to work for any kind of wages because they now lost their cattle. They don't have any other means of livelihood. Apart from this, the new laws which were imposed on them, the laws of the taxation was imposed. Heavy taxation, huge tax was imposed on them. Unable to pay, they sold their land. Laws of inheritance were changed, and the peasants who had many members in the family, only one member could inherit the land. Others had to work as plantation workers or mining workers. So they were confined to the game of these masters, the colonial masters who came to exploit the laborers. That is how the entry of the pest or the disease which has come into Africa, the late 18th century, 1880s, it was carried by the infected cattle which was imported from Britain. This cattle was brought to the Italian soldiers, which was brought to feed them. They eat the meat of the cattle, and with that came the disease to Africa. It entered from Eritrea. We'll locate this on the map. Entering Africa to the east, Pest moved towards the west like a forest fire, searching Africa's Atlantic coast. Reaching there, it has spread the Cape of Africa, the southernmost tip. 5 years later, along the way, that Pest nearly killed 90% of the cattle. The loss of cattle was loss of livelihood because that was their sole occupation. Now they did not have any other occupation. They either had to become planters, I mean, work in plantation, or become mine workers. The planters and the mine owners and the colonial governments knew successful monopolized what was scarce cattle, the leftover little scarce cattle, they traded in it to strengthen their power and to force the helpless Africans to work as laborers in their markets. To control over the scarce resource of the cattle, this was the game of the European colonizers to conquer the part of Africa, to control it, to subjugate it, to subdue it. This is how the havoc spread. Gold mines, Transvaal gold mines, South Africa. Cattle were traded at fairs brought by farmers for sale. One of the oldest livestock market in London was at Smithfield. The mid 19th century, a huge poultry and meat market was established near the railway line connecting Smithfield to all meat supplying centers in the country. Have a this market region. This is Eritrea. This is Eritrea. From here entered the cattle disease called as Renderpest, came from Britannia. The Italian soldiers who were here stationed were brought, that cattle was brought to feed them, and that disease spread to other cattle, and then it moved from this region to the west and then came to the Cape of Good Hope here down. I hope it is clear, my dear children. I'll come up with the indentured labor and the next part of the chapter in the coming video. Thank you so much. God bless you all.